You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And I just want to thank everybody, as I do each and every week, for all your support. Our listeners are growing each and every day, and they are because of you. You're sharing the podcasts with friends and family. Certainly, many of you are, going. Some of you are going to our website to listen, which is boomerstodayradio.com. But so many of you, probably on your walks in the morning or at the end of the day, are listening to it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or you could just download on your app store on your phone our free app. Just look up Boomers Today, and you could just get the app and be updated on a regular basis on our podcasts. So many of you are listening to the show because we have great guests, and we're not going to disappoint you today. We have with us Sherry Haber, who is a former communications executive who led consumer technology product launches for Sony and helped Amazon, Priceline, and LendingTree pioneer e-commerce in 2017 after attempting to write a script for a TV show about baby boomer life. Sherry founded Great Goodbyes to inspire and empower people to die well, with a plan for a better end-of-life experience and a more meaningful goodbye. So Sherry, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today on this very important subject matter.
Thanks, Frank. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so former corporate executive moving to helping people plan for their end of life. How'd that happen?
Well, I had been an employee at an agency, and then I was freelancing, and then I was living my life as a baby boomer, and I was at the gym and looking around, and people of all ages were doing the same thing, and I was thinking, wow, this is really an ageless type of life, and I wanted to write about it. And I talked to my former boss, and we were going to write a screenplay, and we needed a hook for what specifically about boomer life we should focus on. So I just started thinking, and I said, baby boomers are aging differently. They're not on rocking chairs. They're active and young. I wonder if they're dying differently. And I started doing Google searches, and I was amazed at how much was going on, how many new companies and services and methods, and just reimagining what dying would be like, could be like. And the more I learned about it, I said to my partner, it'll be great if we could get a show on the air, but we should get into this business. It's fascinating. And that was the genesis.
Was there a personal experience you went through? I hope not, but usually people go through a personal experience, maybe somebody passing, and the difficulty in that was a catalyst at all.
It was more coincidentally, frankly, that I did have a personal experience, because my entree into death care planning was being mindful of baby boomer living and now dying. But as it turns out, my own mother died suddenly 30 years earlier. And, we were caught off guard. I had to help with the planning. I was numb. I could hardly think. And I had to make all these decisions. I didn't know what things cost. I didn't know what she would have wanted explicitly. I could guess, but it's hard to think when you're numb. So I had a bad experience, and I felt in the end that the funeral could have been, as I say, for Jane Doe. It wasn't reflective of how unique she was. And she was all about the little details and personal touches. And there was no opportunity to reflect that in her goodbye because we hadn't advance planned. So that became my mission, to encourage people to plan in advance so that their goodbye could give them peace of mind and help their children. So while they're grieving, they don't have to be guessing about what you'd want.
Got it. Wow. Okay, good. That's great. Great story. So I know you have a website, it's called greatgoodbyes.com. Is that right?
Yes, all
Okay.
one word,
Oh,
greatgoodbyes.com. Yep.
greatgoodbyes.com. But maybe you could help us understand, I guess when's the right time to start planning for end of life?
Well, quite honestly, it could never be too early, but it can be too late
Right.
because things happen, accidents, unfortunately, and a myriad of things could happen where you die suddenly. But frankly, you should do the planning also mindful that you have a lot of decisions to make. So you want to do it before there's any cognitive decline. I mean, the incidence of Alzheimer's and dementia being what it is, you want to do your planning early. So just in case that's your future. So I think adults, um, as soon as you're old enough to vote, you might as well start planning. You could do it with different planners out there, like Five Wishes, just let you start thinking about it. But with any plan, you're always supposed to revisit it, update your feelings and maybe new information you have, and adjust your plan accordingly. But I would say that as early as 21, certainly once you marry and have children, you should start planning.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you should plan, but I say deal with it, face the inevitability that you will someday die. Deal with it, but don't dwell on it.
In your experience so far in this, have you found that it's the individual themselves that are planning for themselves, or is it other family members that are planning on behalf of that person?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of my initial conversations are with baby boomers because they're sandwich generation. And it goes two ways. It's either they have families and are doing their wills and are thinking beyond just their legal and financial planning for themselves, but then they are also the caretaker for an elder parent. And the parent, if the parent hasn't been forthcoming in making a plan, they will have a lot of guessing, and it could be very stressful and time consuming for them to sort everything out at the time. So it goes both ways. They plan for themselves, and they also plan so that when they have to honor their parents' wishes, they know what those wishes are.
Gotcha. So take us through kind of if somebody was referred to you, contacted you for advice. What are maybe you could kind of go through some of the steps or the types of services that your organization helps people with from a planning standpoint.
Okay, great. Well, as I said, I believe that before you could plan, you have to know what your options are. And because people don't like to think about death and are in denial of death often, they don't know what's out there. So I have what I call a death prep session, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours long. I do it via Zoom. And I go through the different considerations, options, and decisions and documents that will be required and to put together a plan. I'm not a lawyer, a psychologist, or a medical professional. I just make sure that people are prepared by taking care of their end of life needs, and that they start making decisions about their death care, which is really their funeral, what's done with their body, and their legacy, how they want to be remembered. So I'll give them a lot of information in that death prep session, and they need to process it. So the session ends, I send them a summary report that reflects if I said something and they thought that would sound interesting, etc. I reflect that all in the report. I send them links, and they could look further into the things we discussed and make a plan on their own, a kind of do-it-yourself approach. Or if they prefer, they could come back to me and I will take that plan, that summary report and any other thoughts they had after they thought about what we discussed, and I'll put it together into a personalized, actionable plan. So for instance, if they did like the idea of a green burial, and they live in Ohio, I would research the green cemeteries near them so that they could look into being buried there. If they wanted to have their cremains shot into space, I would look into the companies that do that, let them know about costs, etc. So all the different things that they learned about in the death prep session and want to do for their goodbye, I would research and let them know what their options are.
So if I wanted mine at Wrigley Field in Chicago, you could take care of that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
As some
Okay.
people do.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned death care plan. You also mentioned end of life plan. Is there a difference between the two? Or do they overlap? Are they one and the same?
There is, because end of life, and I work with a lot of end of life groups who try to get people to have advanced directives and, really think about the medical care they want at the end of their life. And that's great. And death care is the next step. Death care is when there is no life. So as I say, it's what's done with your body,
Gotcha.
your funeral, and how you want to be remembered. Where they overlap, at least from my perspective, I have a little section in my death prep session that talks about the room where it will happen, the actual, your last hours. What do you want? Do you want aromatherapy? What music? Who do you want in the room? What visuals? Do you want to be by a window? That sort of thing. So that very end of life, I do talk to my clients about, but then the death care and my major focus is when life ends and you're dead.
So I'm just interested. I'm sure you've done a lot of research, on this, and what trends have you seen of, whether they be the planning, whether they be the actual funerals, whether they be, the type of burial, today, are you seeing a different trend that maybe we experienced years ago?
Yes, and some of the trends are not embraced by some of the major religions, but then again, a lot of people are not as affiliated with their religious organization anymore, institutions anymore, so it's not as much of an issue. But quite frankly, cremation is more prevalent than whole body burials in America at this point. It's more than 50%, and in some states it's as high as 70%, and it's increasing every year. So that's because of what I said about religious observance decline. It's because we're a more mobile population. And at least initially, people thought it was less expensive and perhaps more environmentally friendly. But um, there's more than just one kind of cremation now. And fire cremation is not as environmentally friendly as water cremation. And that brings me to the second trend. In addition to the prevalence of cremation, more baby boomers are very concerned about the environmental impact of traditional burials. Embalming, which really is not required by law, but embalming puts all these toxins in the body that get buried and could leach into the soil. The woods and the metal and varnishes and all that in the very ornate caskets, again, get buried and leached into the soil. So people are looking for more eco-friendly type burials.
So are you finding, since more people are doing cremation, which makes a lot of sense today than they maybe did in the past, are you finding that actual burials are on the decline? I'm talking, burying the remains. Are they still having burials, or is that kind of going by the
Well,
wayside?
it's not that burying cremains into niches or columbariums at a cemetery. Some cemeteries have mausoleum niches where you could put the cremains in an urn above ground. I don't know if you noticed, I call them cremains. That's cremated
Right. No,
remains.
I
That's
never
what
heard that. That's
that's
interesting. Yeah,
that's
cremains.
industry talk. But
Okay.
but the reality is that you have a lot of flexibility with what's done. So if you mention Wrigley Field, being buried at Wrigley Field, some people are baseball fans, and in their wishes, they'll say, I want my cremains a little bit scattered at every major ball field in the
Right.
country.
Right.
Or if they
Right.
grew up at the beach, they want it sprinkled at the beach. Or you could make the things you could do with cremains and are being done with cremains now sound very out there. But when I've done public speaking and mentioned it, people may not want to have their cremains be made into tattoo ink or ceramic pottery as you can, but it lets them know that you could really think outside the box for what you do.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
a lot of people
you
are
could get
getting
pretty,
creative.
yeah, I say you could get pretty innovative with this. So, yeah. So, we're going to take just a real quick 30-second break here. We're not going to go off the air. I just want to recognize our sponsor. So I'm going to be right back with you, Sherry, in just 1 second. I just want to, I guess, ask everybody, are you concerned about an older driver? The reason I ask is because Beyond Driving with Dignity is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, you can go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841 to connect with an advisor in your area. So we're back with Sherry Haber. Sherry is the founder of Great Goodbyes. You could check out their website. It's very, very nice. www.greatgoodbyes.com. And so, Sherry, this is fascinating. I know a lot of people don't like talking about death, but I don't like talking. Who does? And nobody likes really talking about death. However, some of the things you brought up before we just took our quick break, very interesting. At least gets people thinking a little more, and they can be creative and innovative uh, for, I guess, how they want to plan the end of their life. So I think it's wonderful what you do.
Thanks.
You mentioned just in our discussions before, people don't know what they don't know. Help us understand that a little bit better.
Well, as I said, when people are being encouraged to make a plan for their end of life, and then if suggested that they also plan for their death, they may just think, well, I could either be buried in the ground or a mausoleum, or I could be cremated by fire. But they don't know that there's another method of cremation that's by water. They
Right.
don't know that there is a company, and now actually there's 3 companies on the West Coast that have a method of body disposition, as it's called. I don't love the term disposition, but that's what it's called, where they put the body on some soft hay and other soft things, and they put some microbiomes in it, and within 30 days, the body is rendered to soil. So it's very gentle on the body. And then when you have the soil, you could be either buried or put, there's some outfits that let you put your cremains or the soil at the base of a tree. It's a company that buys forests, and they will take your cremains or the soil. You pick the tree you want in advance, of course. And when the time comes, if you take one of the other steps of cremation or this other company that will render you to soil, your remains could be put there. So people don't know about all these things, let alone what all the possibilities that could be done with your cremains, some of which we've discussed before. So if they don't know about it, how could they say, what I want is
Right.
that,
They don't know
if
all
they
the
don't know it
information.
exists?
Yeah, yeah. So talk to us a little bit more about what you said, the water cremation. It's very interesting. Do all companies do that? Do they give you that option, or you have to use a certain organization that just does the water cremation, or is that pretty common amongst all companies that are in that business?
No, it's not done by all companies that offer fire cremation. These are specialized companies, and currently it's not available in every state. In fact, it's only about a dozen states in which you'll find a company in that business. So it's limited, but it too is expanding because the energy used for the water is less than for the ovens of,
Right.
cremation. So,
And is
and
it
and there's no emission the way with fire. There's a sizable amount of mercury that's emitted, so it's not great.
and you mentioned those that are, doing it by you mentioned some process where they go into the hay and are in the soil, and that could take up to 30 days. What about water? Could that take longer as well?
Well, the water cremation is just a couple of hours, so
Okay.
it's
Gotcha.
not that long. It's not,
Gotcha.
but you think about it, part of the reason for the move away from whole body burial, as well, is that we're running out of space. In
Right.
Arlington National Cemetery, they're running out of space. So, and other cemeteries, and people may not like the idea of having land consumed for dead bodies, especially if the family moves far away. It's just, it's
Right.
out of necessity that people are embracing other methods, I believe.
Got it. Got it. So this seems like a real specialization, what you do. I got to believe it's kind of a unique type of business. I mean, I'm sure maybe others are doing it, but you don't hear about it too much.
I'm certainly not the only one doing it, and there's a lot of planning resources online. But as I said, you need to know before you could plan and take action. So I think that what I provide is helpful toward the goal of advanced planning. Um, I also have a unique approach. I found as I look at other entities out there, they may be just focusing on funerals. And, it's not to say that I don't do anything to help people enhance a traditional funeral. I certainly do. But I look at all the other things being done, and it's not just about the funeral service. It's, as I said, you could do with your body, and then very importantly, how you want to be remembered. Baby
Right.
boomers are very much into brand and how they want to be remembered, and you plan your other life events based on your values and your personal preferences. This is your last life event. It extends to that as well, I believe.
All right. So we just, it's such an interesting subject matter. We only have a couple minutes left, so maybe you could give us kind of an overview and kind of how you work, and what advice to you that you can give to our listeners, and how they take that first step from a planning standpoint.
I think the hardest thing is to get people comfortable with thinking about it, thinking about death, accepting, as they say, the reality of our mortality. And if that's the case, there's a lot of books, not scholarly books. Some are humorous, some are just very straightforward. There's a lot of books, there's movies to just get comfortable with the subject, because advanced planning is sensible. It's not morbid. It's death is inevitable. So making a plan in advance so you're prepared is sensible. And then it's kind to your loved ones, because they're free to be with you in your final moments without worrying about logistics and asking you all these questions. And they could grieve when the time comes, knowing they know what to do. So it's sensible and kind. And frankly, it also, once you accept the inevitability of it all, what I find just in my own dealings and conversations, people tend to appreciate every day and make every day count and have more gratitude. So it really enriches your life to think about death.
Right.
It's the idea that a better death is integral with the idea of a well life. So I encourage people to learn about their options, think about what's most important to them and what would be kind and comfortable for the loved ones you leave behind, because some things you can do digitally and otherwise to be present when you're gone and communicate beyond the grave. We didn't get into a lot of that. May be uncomfortable for the living to encounter. So you have to really think about what's most important, and then make a plan, and then go live your life with greater purpose and gratitude.
Great. Sherry, thank you so much for joining us. So I know I mentioned it, greatgoodbyes.com. Is there any other information you want to share with our listeners if they wanted to reach out to you? Or is
I
that the
do
best
think
way?
that I do think the website's the best way. I have greatgoodbyes@gmail.com is the email address, but there's forms and links on the site to get in touch with me as well.
Great. Sherry Haber, Great Goodbyes. Check it out, greatgoodbyes.com. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for joining us as well. We'll talk to you all next week, and please be safe.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.